right. All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here as we continue the Wild Ones Ozark Chapters 2021 webinar series. This webinar is being recorded, and afterwards the recording will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. Wild Ones Native Plants Natural Landscapes is a nonprofit organization that promotes environmentally sound landscaping practices to preserve biodiversity through the preservation, restoration, and establishment of native plant communities. If you're interested in joining our chapter or a chapter near you, you can go to members.wildones.org/join. And you can find out more about our organization at our website. Our chapter website is ozark.wildones.org. Check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/OzarkWildOnes, or contact us at our Gmail account, which is wildonesozarkchapter@gmail.com. The next webinar in our webinar series will be next week on Wednesday, December 15th at 11 a.m. Scott Bealey, who is a landscape architecture professor at the University of Arkansas, is going to give us a talk on Ozark plant communities as design inspiration. In 2022, we will be returning to in-person meetings, which we're excited about, but we will require masks to be worn at all meetings. We want to make it a safe space for people to feel like they're safe enough to return to. But our monthly programs, they will be in person, but we will still continue to provide webinars intermittently throughout the year. So no worries on that if you don't live in the area. And also, if you receive the Native Plant Society webinars, which I usually send to you as well, those will still be monthly. Our speaker this month is Joe Ledvina. Joe is a botanist for the Arkansas Department of Transportation and has previously worked in Virginia as a plant ecologist for the Smithsonian Institution, where he managed a long-term grassland restoration ecology project in partnership with Virginia Working Landscapes. Joe is also an active participant in the Arkansas Monarch Conservation Partnership, where he represents ARDOT and their initiative to increase habitat for the monarch butterfly along the roadway corridors they manage. Today, Joe's going to talk to us about ARDOT's Monarch Habitat and Initiative and the great work they've been doing to help promote monarch habitat along the corridors. So with that, I'll hand it over to Joe.
Thank you, Eric, for that excellent introduction. I've been here in Arkansas since 2017, and I started with the department in early 2019 in my current full-time position, and then the previous year, 2018, I was an intern. I got to do some plant surveys in the national forests for a year. I'm gonna talk to you about our existing wildflower programs. And then I'm going to talk to you about our new initiatives for the Monarch, which is essentially primarily our voluntary pre-listing conservation program or agreement with the Fish and Wildlife Service. And first, I'll give you a little bit of background on Monarchs, but I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here, and everybody is pretty familiar. So there have been several factors in the decline of the monarch. I think the first I heard about it, I wasn't as involved in plant and pollinator work. I heard about the loss of the overwintering habitat down in Mexico. And I know that a lot of that has been protected, but there are still concerns, especially from illegal logging. The concerns with the breeding and migration habitat have become much more prominent in recent years. There's been a lot of habitat loss, habitat degradation, and fragmentation, mostly from our increased efficiency in our farming practices. And these affect the distribution and abundance of many of our milkweed species that the monarchs depend on. And especially since the introduction of herbicide-resistant crops, herbicide has been used more regularly to kill weeds inside the crop fields and killed off many milkweed populations. Another factor to be concerned about is the increased use of pesticides, and especially neonicotinoid pesticides to kill crop pests. And finally, we have concerns due to climate change. Climate change increases the threat of winter storms to their breeding sites, and it could cause some increased storms that could disrupt migrations. And then climate change could also result in some disjuncts between timing of plant flowering and the arrival of the monarchs. It was originally petitioned to be listed in 2014, and after years of review and some kicking the can down the road, at the end of 2020, the Fish and Wildlife Service announced last year that listing is warranted but precluded. This means that they've determined that the monarch does deserve to be listed. However, they don't have the resources to carry out that listing process for every deserving species. And there are some species with higher priorities that will have to be listed first. They maintain a list of these officially named as candidate species, and they're ranked in priority based on both the magnitude and the imminence of the threat to the species and the uniqueness of the taxon. So if you have a species that's the only species in its genus, that gets a little higher priority than a species, which in turn gets a higher priority than a subspecies. The next review is due in 2024, at which time they may propose to list the monarch and begin the listing process. One thing that people tend to ask when we talk about monarchs and roadsides is, do you really want to bring those monarchs to the roads where they're going to get hit by cars? Well, people have been doing research on this, and it has been shown that roadsides that support diverse stands of native wildflowers, grasses, and forbs do provide important habitat for pollinators. They've even shown that if you have large patches of high quality habitat, that can prevent movement of some pollinators into the roads and potentially even prevent those from suffering collisions with vehicles, presumably because they have enough floral resources away from the roadside and they don't have to travel as far to look for more nectar. This is probably more applicable to species that are less mobile and less wide-ranging than the monarch, though. When I see a monarch, it's usually just covering dozens or hundreds of feet between landing. And it's not always because I'm trying to chase it with my cell phone to get a picture to post on iNaturalist. So some studies that have monitored roadside pollinator populations, including butterflies, for every source of mortality, have shown that vehicle collisions are usually a pretty small percentage of the overall mortalities. Of course, roadside mortality does vary among species, and butterflies do tend to be a little more at risk than some other things like bees. Roadsides can also provide some connectivity and migration corridors through less suitable habitat. Here you can see an aerial view of the Highway 7 corridor through part of the Ozark National Forest here in Johnson County. The corridors can also be useful through cropland, especially now that so many more landowners are not only herbiciding and creating a monoculture in the fields, but they are herbiciding around the margins of the fields and removing all of the available habitat. The Monarch joint venture has several initiatives promoting roadside habitat and promoting conservation of wildflowers and pollinator habitat on roadsides. And they've made some of the tools that we've used as a part of our voluntary pre-listing agreement to develop our monitoring strategy. We all know that monarchs depend on milkweeds. The caterpillars will only eat milkweeds as they're growing. And Arkansas has many species of milkweeds. The swamp milkweed that you see on the left is a pretty showy one that's in the northern part of the state. And the butterfly milkweed is probably the most common. And that and the green milkweed are the ones that we're most likely to be planting on the roadsides when it comes to that. And then I really like the aquatic milkweed that I see in just about every marshy habitat in South Arkansas. But more than just milkweeds, since Arkansas tends to have a relatively small resident summer population of monarchs, we are really important for those floral resources in the fall. And the monarchs use a variety of flowering plants during their fall migration, including things like goldenrods, asters, and blazing stars. And some studies have pointed to fall nectar sources as being one of the limiting factors contributing to their decline. With that lack of nectar sources, making it hard to fuel their southward migration to Mexico. So now I'll go over our existing wildflower programs, many of which have been placed for years or even decades. And just about all of these can contribute to monarch conservation. And I like to split them up into these two sets with conservation measures and then enhancement measures. Our conservation measures to me are likely the more important. For one reason, we can do them on much larger areas. Our mowing guidelines are applicable to every roadside in the state. And then for another thing, protecting the habitat we have should always be the priority. These communities have developed over decades to centuries. And if we wipe them out, it's really hard to offset them by just planting a new native wildflower area somewhere else. So our conservation mowing guidelines, before we had these guidelines, the practice was to mow the full width of the right-of-way during every mowing. And they mowed 3 to 4 times in a year. And they'd mow all the way from the roadway to the right-of-way fence on each side of the road. Our guidelines now establish a more conservative approach where we mow the full width, only 1 mowing per year. And then we have a clear zone next to the pavement that we mow more often. You can see the clear zone in this picture where the wildflowers kind of stop just at the edge of that swath that mower is going to mow, where the more frequent mowing has promoted the grasses. The clear zone improves sight lines for safety and also provides a safe space for vehicles to pull off the road if they ever need to. On our typical highways that aren't freeways, our clear zone is 10 feet wide, and then our transition zone can be up to 30 feet wide. And it's this transition zone where we want our wildflowers to thrive. Typically, our right-of-way fence is 30 or 40 feet from the pavement, though it's sometimes narrower and sometimes wider. If the right-of-way is wider than 40 feet, then beyond this transition zone, we will allow trees to grow up. On the freeways, because of the higher speeds and the need for better sight lines, especially in on-ramps, the clear zone is expanded to 30 feet. But also the transition zone can be up to 50 feet. We do still have to mow in this transition zone, because if we didn't mow, then the trees would just grow up and take over. They would shade out the wildflowers. And if we have the trees growing too close to the road, they could cause safety issues by obscuring sight lines, even worse. We've had some of our maintenance, our districts recently have been clearing some trees to prevent them from shading the road in those rare chances that we have icy conditions in the morning. And also, if they're too close, they could just fall into the roadway. Mowing in the fall in southern Arkansas is a little bit tricky because many of the roadsides get fairly wet. The soil gets saturated pretty early in the fall. If the soil is wet, the tractors and the mower wheels can get bogged down, and they can create ruts in the roadsides, and that can leave exposed soil, which could be an area where invasive species could take hold. Our mowing window for the fall is October 1st to Thanksgiving. So that means that some of this mowing occurs while our stands of wildflowers are blooming. In an ideal world, we could skip every stand with wildflowers and then just come back later, but we'd still have the rutting issues, and also the expense of essentially going through twice would just double the cost. And we don't have the amount of resources ourselves to do all this mowing. And even though we rely heavily on contractors, there are a few contractors, and they tend to move from county to county. In some counties, mostly in the Mississippi alluvial plain, we've allowed them to mow in July. During the July mowing, they mow the full width. This is because it's particularly bad in these rice regions where they're maintaining the water for the rice, and those roadsides are more likely to be full of water early in the fall. However, many plants that bloom in the summer would also be affected, and pollinators could also be impacted by this mowing. Still, many of these plants can jump back up and flower, including some of the milkweeds, after they've been mowed. We've been evaluating since this year whether we can try to do some mowing every other year, mow the full width in the fall to give those wildflowers a rest in some years. Our wildflower routes were begun in the late 90s, and it originally was a little over 1,000 miles of roads. We now have nearly 1,300 miles of roads, including our most recent addition, which is protecting a long stretch of habitat for the frosted elfin butterfly in Southwest Arkansas. These routes are long stretches of roads that have important wildflower displays. Usually they're showy displays of native wildflowers. Some of them are diverse. Some of them can be pretty not as diverse, but still showy. Some of them, like that frosted elfin route, protect large populations of rare species. Within our wildflower routes, broadcast herbicide is prohibited, even in the clear zone, but spot treatment of invasive species is allowed. You'll notice in this map that the Mississippi alluvial plain on the eastern side of the state is pretty lacking in these routes. We know that the intensive agriculture and all of the aerial spraying has probably been a factor in this. I know there are several small patches of wildflowers, but I don't know of any long stretches that could qualify for wildflower route. We also, after the wildflower route program was established, we established a native wildflower area signage program. So these are smaller areas that wouldn't qualify as wildflower routes, but they get the same protection as the wildflower routes. No herbicide, even in the clear zone. And they also get a sign to help the mowers and the herbicide operators avoid them. The one on the left here is a big display of longflower bee blossom here in Little Rock, and on the lower right is an interesting one. This is along in the median of I-40 in the western edge of Johnson County. This district is really proud of their Texas paintbrush. And this patch has been there for decades, but the species is only known historically from a couple of Arkansas counties, a little north and west of here, and a record down near the Louisiana border. It's possible that some seeds of this species blew in on their own, but it's more likely that it came in a contamination from the seed mix that somebody got from Texas, or it could have come in if they brought in soil from Texas. This is the Texas paintbrush, and our more common paintbrush is oh my God, I'm blanking on the name.
Indian.
Yeah, Indian paintbrush. Yeah, I was trying to think of the scientific name. This one's Indivisa. That one is the common one is Coccinia. We also do some native plant rescues. The photo on the left was yellow coneflower, Echinacea paradoxa, that was collected where Highway 21 in Carroll County was being widened. This was in the 2000s. They dug up the plants and brought them to our nursery here in Little Rock, and then they planted them back out after the construction was completed. The follow-up surveys they did showed excellent survivorship. On the lower left is my predecessor in this position and now my supervisor, Katie Ewing, in her best field clothes, transporting some swamp milkweed out of a construction zone and to be planted at Fayetteville's Woolsey Wet Prairie. In the middle is a photo of a corkwood. It's a rare small wetland tree. This has been considered a single species in the genus Lightnaria floridana, scattered in pretty limited areas in Florida, Georgia, Arkansas, Missouri, and Texas. Recent genetic and morphological data really point to it being two species and one of them having two subspecies, with ours being Lightnaria pilosa subspecies Ozarkana. One of the first things I did when I started as an intern back in 2018 was go out with some folks and collect, dig up a whole bunch of these on a section of 412 north of Jonesboro that was being widened. And we transplanted them into our Walnut Ridge mitigation area. I took a stop there out of my way last year and saw that the population is doing great. So I was excited to see that. And we have a pending bridge job coming up next year in Southeast Arkansas near Lake Village, where there's a small patch of this guy growing in the right of way where they're going to put the new bridge, and we plan to do the same thing, dig them up and move them to what's going to be a new mitigation area down the road. On the lower right is Arkansas meadow rue. And this species is only known from a narrow band from central Arkansas into Kentucky, or I'm sorry, Oklahoma. This population was right here in Little Rock, just down the road from my office. Crooked Creek was flooding where it goes under I-30, and so they have plans to develop and broaden the floodplain. Katie went out there and moved dozens of these plants just from one side of the creek to the other. And last year we visited and we still saw dozens of plants doing well. Under the banner of our enhancement measures, we have our standard seeding specification. We plant these 6 species after every highway construction project. And on federal property and state lands, we additionally apply our special seeding specification. This adds butterfly milkweed and a partridge pea as our nitrogen fixer. And then instead of planting the Bermuda, we plant a mix of native grasses. And then we have our Operation Wildflower program. This follows a program that was originally begun by Lady Bird Johnson. And it's a way for us to be involved with some local communities. We have a sponsor donates seed, and we help them choose a location, and then we do the preparation and the planting. Here's a shot of an earlier one of these from planted in 2000. This is the Mountain Home Master Gardeners actually helping sow these seeds on the Mountain Home bypass. We've planted a few acres of these in most of the past several years. The minimum size is 1 acre. And we try to avoid doing long strips, 10 or 20 feet wide. It's just, we prefer to make larger patches of habitat, and also from an invasibility standpoint, it seems like we'll have more success if we make larger patches. It can sometimes be challenging to find suitable areas because of this. And then we have our Milkweed Enhancement program, which Katie started in 2014, planting green milkweed opportunistically on dozens of locations in our right-of-way and on some of our mitigation sites. I mentioned that for the yellow coneflower, they brought it back to our nursery. That was kind of fell into disuse, and Katie didn't have the background, and nor did I, or the time to revive it. But we recently hired another botanist, Nick Dial, who has been putting tons of effort into rejuvenating the nursery, and you can see it here with the new shade cloth. In addition to using this to grow some trees for our wetland and stream mitigation sites, we plan to begin propagating our own milkweeds next year to create plugs to plant out at our roadsides. So our voluntary pre-listing conservation program is an agreement with the Fish and Wildlife Service, developed in cooperation with them, with the goal of conserving the monarch and also 6 other species that have been petitioned to be listed. The main goal of this program is to reduce the likelihood that the covered species will become listed as threatened or endangered. We described our mowing and herbicide policies, and we pledged to follow these policies in the agreement. And this program not only benefits the covered species, but it benefits ARDOT if the species do become listed. In that case, it can be converted into a biological opinion. And that will help us streamline our consultations with the Fish and Wildlife Service, both for construction jobs and if we have to consult with the Fish and Wildlife Service for our statewide maintenance program, that would be a big burden, but our biological opinion will help us streamline that. There is a nationwide candidate conservation agreement with assurances that's geared towards energy and transportation and entities. And in that program, you had to enroll a minimum amount of your acreage to qualify. And a lot of the promises in the document regarding maintenance are fairly similar. And you also have to promise to do a fairly minimum amount of yearly monitoring. The CCAA is the last part is assurances, and that part means that if the species becomes listed, no additional conservation measures will be required by the Fish and Wildlife Service. One major concern for us with that program was that it could not be applied on federal lands. We have hundreds of miles of highway in our national forests, which is not completely unique, but I believe we have more than some other states. And then instead of the assurance that no additional conservation measures will be required, the program allows us to generate credits for conservation actions that can later be applied to offset activities that aren't detailed in the agreement. So we could apply them for construction projects and not just maintenance, changes in maintenance. Any actions begun since the agreement was begun are eligible to generate credits. But we have not yet developed a system of credits or a credit ledger. Those don't need to be developed until the species is listed. In addition to, renewing our a pledge to follow these conservation maintenance guidelines, we plan to increase our wildflower plantings, including planting more large acreages and wildflowers. We own, I believe, thousands of acres of wetland and stream mitigation sites, and many of these have upland areas that are abandoned pastures or abandoned hayfields where we can plant, which we can convert to native wildflowers and grasses. Also, since our maintenance division reviewed and signed off on this agreement, they've showed some eagerness to participate, and we've been contacted by a couple of the districts about doing special wildflower areas in certain areas. I mentioned that it covered the monarch and six listed species. That's another benefit to this program, is that we can include other species that occur on our roadways and benefit from the same management. We have these 5 crayfish and another butterfly, the frosted elfin, that most of these species are found primarily on roadsides. Some of that undoubtedly is because our maintaining this open habitat on the roadsides. In the case of the crayfish, it's maintaining the wet ditches with the herbaceous cover, the sedges and rushes. And for the elfin, it's maintaining native wildflower areas, if you will, with Baptisia species. But there is the potential that they have been undersurveyed on private lands. But we do know that the roadsides are important. And this list of species was, these are species that have been petitioned to be listed. And these particular species were considered of higher priority by the Arkansas Natural Heritage Division and the Fish and Wildlife Service. So the same conservation actions will be applied. The same conservation mowing benefits the covered crayfish. And we are also going to be implementing some additional conservation measures for these species. We are really interested in trying some habitat expansions and relocations of the crayfish, particularly if they're threatened by our construction jobs. So to date, the programmatic conference opinion is what sort of ratified our agreement from the Fish and Wildlife Service. We developed the agreement since 2019, and it was finally signed in 2021. And at the moment, we are beginning our monitoring, because we do have some plantings that were not under the Operation Wildflower program that would qualify for credits if the species becomes listed. In order to develop a system of baseline plots, I used the Monarch Joint Ventures habitat suitability model. In this map, you can see the redder roadsides are in the riskier areas, and the greenest to bluest roadsides are in the best areas. This tool uses simply a landscape classification, a nationwide landscape classification, and it values open areas, but it considers areas of crops with high herbicide use to be more risky. And that's why the Mississippi alluvial plain comes out all red. So I used a map like this to spread a large number of baseline plots, prioritizing the areas that came out with high ratings in this model. And that brought me to this map that I used last year to start tracking my progress. And you can see one of the roadsides in the left, and we're using the rapid roadside habitat assessments, also from the Monarch Joint Venture. I developed a very large goal of more than 200 plots. We will probably see what we get next year and be satisfied with that. Under the CCAA, a program of our size would be required to monitor just 50 plots in a year. And you can see the green stars in this map are the baseline plots that I haven't visited yet. And then the blue flowers are all of our previous Operation Wildflower plantings that I know of, going back to the 90s, and some of those were on paper maps or based on just on descriptions. And then the brown cows that give milk are depicting the areas where Katie planted milkweeds, the ones that I haven't visited. All of the black dots are areas that I visited since July. Yeah, and I've seen a large variety of roadsides, and one thing I've seen is that we have some exceptions to our conservation mowing guidelines. one is we have a good neighbor program where if the adjacent landowner is mowing up to our right of way, as a lawn, is maintaining a lawn, then we will mow the full width in all 3 mowings, so that they don't have a scraggly patch of grass in front of their mowed lawn. But also, many landowners are mowing our right of way in front of their properties themselves. I don't know if it's been increasing in the short time since I've been with the department. I think I've just learned to notice it more. Anytime you see an area of right of way that looks like a lawn, it's only grass, it's very, very uniform. There's a good chance that we're not doing that mowing. It's the adjacent landowner that's doing that mowing. Now the rapid roadside habitat assessment tool, it uses ESRI's survey 123. So it can use a cell phone or a tablet in the field to enter all the data electronically, and then it generates these calculations. It gives you one score, but one of the weights in that score is still that adjacent land use. And another weight is just the size of the road. They prioritized, they said they thought that smaller roads were preferable to larger roads. And we don't really have any control of that. So I thought we wouldn't be using the overall score for our monitoring, but it also, as it does the calculations, it creates some of these sub-scores. So this preliminary map is just showing the baseline plots, only the baseline plots that I visited this year, which are areas that we did not plant. And the colors, the blue is showing you how much weed cover there was, and the orange is showing you what our management, the quality of our management. And that's based a lot of how wide the actual clear zone was relative to the width of the roadway. The clear zone is 10 feet, but these have tended to vary between about 8 and 20 feet. And sometimes the roadway is pretty narrow. So in both of these cases, darker is better in terms of the Monarch. So these really blue plots that you see, they were being mowed pretty strongly, but they didn't have a lot of weeds. And the brown plots are both being mowed well and don't have a lot of weeds. Those orange plots, they're being mowed well, but they still have a lot of weeds. And then the bottom is a foraging component score, and that's based on the amount of potential nectar plants, any potential nectar plant, whether it's flowering or not, and then the richness and how many species are native of those potential nectar sources. And in this case, the larger is better. And you can see with the exception of this consistent, low weeds but high mowing in these areas of South Arkansas, we have kind of a mix. But this can give us some ideas about where we can do better, where we're doing well, where we have good management, and where we can do better. That is the status we're at right now. That I plan to plant some of our mitigation areas, just a few acres this year in January, and continue this monitoring next year. As Eric mentioned, we are a member of the Arkansas Monarch Conservation Partnership, and you can go to their website at arkansasmonarchs.org. And if you would like to contact me, you can take down my contact information there.
All right. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. That was a great presentation, and appreciate you sharing with us all the good things that you are doing there at the Arkansas Department of Transportation. Just want to remind people, if you have any questions, enter them into the chat and I'll ask these to Joe. I have a few that have already been submitted. First of all, I had a question personally. What can people do if they're aware of a rare species of plant or wildflower along a roadside that's managed by ARDOT? Maybe if it's not in an area already under protection from spraying and whatnot, are they able to reach out to you to kind of let you know where those are?
Yes, absolutely. I am the person to contact. If you lose my contact information or you don't remember, you can also just go to I Drive Arkansas, and there's an ask a question button, and your question about wildflowers will get routed to me.
Okay, awesome. That's good to know. Larry Price asked, do you try to get ecotype specific seed, or do you happen to buy through the Arkansas Native Seed Program? And I know y'all are a stakeholder on that Arkansas Native Seed Program, but I'm not sure if y'all are able to get seed from there yet, but if you could speak on that.
Yeah, those, we haven't gotten any yet, but we are looking into using some Arkansas Native seed for our first round of what we're going to be doing in the greenhouse. I suppose I hadn't priced the seed yet for, we only recently identified these 2 mitigation sites that are already ready to be planted. They don't need any prep. And so I am going to look into Arkansas Native seed to plant both of those.
Okay, awesome. Lynn Foster says there's a lot of dicamba use in Eastern Arkansas. Are there any farmers groups working with you, or are you doing any outreach to farmers?
I have not been involved with outreach to farmers at all or anything with dicamba.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know you're only one person and there's only so much you can do in a day. And that's a big issue to tackle there. I know there are some groups like Audubon that are studying and tracking the spread of dicamba impacts on native vegetation. Tony Romano asks, have you seen noxious weeds spread more in areas where mowing has been reduced? And does the cost of spot treatments offset the reduced cost of mowing?
So the savings from spot treatments. I think as spot treatments actually are probably more expensive than mowing.
Okay.
Unfortunately, just because of the person hours, it takes more people to cover a certain area, and it takes them longer. As long as the weeds are dense. I suppose if the weeds are really sparse, then spot treatments wouldn't. Yeah, can you repeat the first part of the question?
The first one was, have you seen noxious weeds spread more in areas where mowing has been reduced?
I haven't been able to track areas where mowing has been reduced, so I can't really speak to that question.
Okay. Do you
most
have
of these mowing
that
reductions happened a long time ago.
Gotcha. Yeah, man,
and then sometimes things are inconsistent, so some areas don't get mowed as they should.
Okay. Yeah, and I know you probably need funding or something to be able to have more people to go out and track stuff, and kind of limited with the budgets you're given. We have a few comments here. Susan Harden says, thank you, Joe, for bringing us up to date on these important conservation projects. Wish our county roads had similar initiatives. Larry Price mentions that he collected for Project Wingspan in several places. On Highway 27, they cut in June 2021 the entire right-of-way. They were unable to get seed in this area. They did great there in 2020. So I don't know if that was just a mistake on the part of the county maintenance, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, if you see something like that, if they're mowing somewhere full width that's not in like the rice region in the summer, then yes, go ahead and contact me.
Yeah, let them know. Yeah, this might end up getting you a lot of extra emails, Joe. You might be regret saying this. All right. Larry also says he saw great numbers of partridge pea planted to stabilize around new bridges on Highway 7 south of Ola and Hot Springs Village, and he thinks that is great.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
And then he
Yeah,
just
I
put
know,
in,
I've seen that.
yep, and he just put a new comment in the chat, says, great info. Glad you're doing what you're doing. See, Shayna Sessler says, I'm so glad to hear about the native plant rescues. Whenever I see construction, especially in an area where I'm familiar with the plant population, I worry about what's being lost. So Shayna, yeah, definitely give Joe an email when you see those plants, and maybe we can get more of those in wild ones. That's native plant rescues are things that we do as well. So we're happy to be some boots on the ground for you, Joe, whenever y'all have these. We've worked with Jennifer Ogle on some in Fayetteville as well. So keep us in mind in this part of the state anyway, when you have those or need something like that. Then Shannon Chamberlain says it's heartening to hear what's being done to conserve native plants, butterflies, and other species in our state. Thank you for all your efforts. And I think that's most of the comments here. A lot of other people, you got a clapping hands from John Kleckler, and Rob King says, nice job. So there aren't any other comments. We'll go ahead and wrap up here. Well, Joe, I really appreciate you sharing your time and explaining, showing us all of the great things that you're doing. We appreciate all your efforts that you and other employees at ARDOT are making to help, conserve native plants along our roadways. So I want to thank everyone also again for being with us here today. Again, the recording of this webinar will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube, type in Wild Ones Ozark Chapter, you can find this video later on, most likely today or tomorrow. Our next webinar is Wednesday, December 15th at 11 a.m. Scott Bealey from the University of Arkansas is going to speak about Ozark plant communities as design inspiration. And again, if you want to join our chapter or a chapter near you, you can go to members.wildones.org/join. Our chapter's website is ozark.wildones.org. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/ozarkwildones. Contact us via email at wildonesozarkchapter@gmail.com. It looks like we had one last question squeezed in here at the very end from Alan's iPad. When an area is seeded through the wildflower program that doesn't produce, will it be reseeded?
We've had a couple and we've evaluated and it hasn't been done in the past, but there are some areas where there's one area in Truman where we planted and some Johnson grass just took over, and we are trying to take care of the Johnson grass, and then I think we're probably going to have to reseed that area.
Okay. I know there's one hillside on Highway 62 between Rogers and Garfield that when they widened that, they had originally reseeded it all, and it seemed like the purple coneflower was really taking over that first year. And then after that year, I never saw any. That's on my way to and from town every day, and I didn't know if you happen to know anything about that.
Oh, so the construction projects, we have not tried to follow up and reseed any of those. I'd like to add, we can't ask for too much at once. I'd like to add a program where we maybe choose special areas of construction zones, especially if we're doing like a huge interchange, and we can seed ourselves, because right now, we require the contractors to seed. Some states, they contract the contractors to do the construction, and then they have a separate contract for establishing vegetation, and they might get better results that way. They also in the construction, they apply fertilizer, which is going to promote the grass over the wildflowers. Yeah. And I don't know how much we want to push against that, because the grass does have to take hold pretty quickly to provide that slope stabilization.
Yeah, and this is a pretty steep slope. So, and it does seem like a lot of the broom sedge, blue stem, and other warm season grasses have, become well established there, which is still beneficial to, wildlife and whatnot. So I was just really excited when I thought it was going to be all pretty colorful in the beginning, but Anyway, well, thank you again, Joe. We
Yeah.
appreciate your time. This has been great. And again, yeah, thank you. We really,
Okay.
this has been a great presentation. So we'll talk to you
Okay.
soon.
Thank you. All right.
Bye-bye.